Alrighty, howdy everybody. Welcome to Shatter the Script Week 2, where we debunk the mainstream media across all NFL platforms and college football. But I'm your host, Jared May, and I'm joined by.
Under pool, ready to rock and roll, baby.
All right, yeah, we got a lot of football going on right now. Currently, we're recording on a Sunday afternoon, of course, live 6 p.m. Central Time. We have Cincinnati and Kansas City currently playing in about 7.5 minutes left. Cincinnati with the lead, 25-23. A lot of back and forths here. But we wanted to get across our fantasy football stardom situm recaps and our Sunday night football predictions for this evening with the Bears and Houston Texans, our Shatter the Script segment, along with a little breakdown of what we saw today. But we're going to start with our breakdown. The best thing about football is it's 7 hours of commercial-free football. So we'll ask again, what did you do today?
Every day on Sunday, what I do is I watch football and I sit back and just watch my fantasy teams go to shit.
That's right. Yeah. And the greatest thing about fantasy football this week is that a lot of good teams lost. And so that caused for a lot of mayhem in fantasy football, particularly with the stardom situms. We'll get to see how that recap went later in the episode. But yeah, I mean, there's a couple of highlights we wanted to go over this week and kind of give a recap on. Let's start with Dan Quinn getting his first dub as a head coach for the Washington Commanders versus the New York Giants, nonetheless. But 7 field goals from the Commanders in this game. I mean, this was kind of they were tied at 18-18 at one point, which is like I feel like one of the rarest scores. I think there's a word for like a rare score in the NFL with the difference in points. But I mean, from what we saw from this game in a fantasy perspective, I know Malik Neighbors got a lot of attention. Right? Malik Neighbors, excuse me. Analysis so far through 2 weeks with Malik Neighbors and Daniel Jones connection.
So Malik Neighbors, drafted 6th overall. He was the second receiver taken, which is crazy in the first 6 picks. Malik Neighbors puts on the show. He got banged up. He catches a drag route, goes about 25 yards down the field, and gets absolutely smash mouth football by Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn's always going to keep them boys ready. Malik Neighbors is going to be one of those players who is going to have potential to be a offensive rookie of the year. Of course, we have another guy to talk about later who also shined today. Malik Neighbors looks like he's going to be the real deal. And, LSU is one of those programs that's going to keep producing those wide receivers, those Louisiana boys. Louisiana. So, but, the Giants looked a lot better than they did last week. However, though, they're going against Washington, who also is going with the rookie quarterback. And, we'll see what we're going through. But Malik Neighbors, Daniel Jones might not win a lot of games, but good for fantasy moving forward.
Yeah, and Jaden Daniels was a part of your stardoms on the Fantasy Outlook, and in terms of like the amount of opportunities he got in this game, he had quite a few, and I know he took a big shot while standing up right to the ribs, and that's one of those things where you want not just one rib cage, but maybe 3 or 4 to pad up those rib cages, because we did see a guy like Quinn Ewers go down, and for Jaden Daniels' sides, I mean, that's a concern for your rookie quarterback going in. I don't know who their backup is currently. I'll have to check. But a strong performance by Brian Robinson Jr. I'm butchering every name this afternoon.
Calm down.
17 rushes for like 135 yards. He was one of the fantasy guys that I really, really expected to have a strong performance, at least on the ground this year. But people's concerns with him in fantasy was catching the ball, because they got Eckler, and Eckler doesn't want the carries. He probably just wants the catches. But, Brian Robinson is proving to be a very consistent back in the NFL.
Would you go to say that Brian Robinson is a flex start going for the rest of the year?
I would say so. I think he's in there in the discussion for sure. I mean, there's definitely other options out there to where you can consider depending on what your roster looks like. But in terms of what the fantasy outlook has been the last 2 or 3 years, it is very difficult to find a workhorse running back in fantasy football. There's a ton of committee backfields nowadays. But if you get a guy like Brian Robinson, who's getting 15 to 20 touches a game and kind of gets involved 1 or 2 times in the passing game, a red zone ally for fantasy, I think this guy is a huge league winner if you're down on running backs and you got him on there, throw him in 1,000%. Running back 2, running back 3, I would say going forward, especially against lower tiered opponents. I mean, if they're playing a top tier Super Bowl contender, you might want to, go back on that and kind of evaluate because they could be in passing scenarios.
It's funny, they kind of feed off that, looking at a team like the Rams versus Cardinals. The Rams are in shambles right now. Going forward, how do you feel like the Rams need to do with Cooper Kupp just announced he's in a walking boot, Puka's on the IR, lines in shambles, defense? Was this a good win by Arizona, or is this to show how the Rams are down bad right now?
I had really high hopes for the Rams going into the season. I mean, this is what you talk about before the season is what the full roster looks like healthy. And then we go in and you lose instantly Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, but you have a dual running back system. I think it's vital for the Rams to figure out a running game to take some stress off of Stafford so that he's not throwing the ball like 50 times a game. And I understand that Stafford is a gunslinger, but look at Justin Herbert right now and for the Chargers. I know they played the Panthers today, but he has a run game, and that helps gunslingers like that really tone it down and create a highly efficient gunslinging quarterback archetype. And so I think if the Rams are going to have any success moving forward, because I imagine Kupp is going to miss a couple of weeks, you're going to have to rely on the younger guys. That's not easy. As a veteran, you're still missing your starting tight end. It's going to have to be control the time of possession and run the ball with Blake Corum and Kyron Williams. Maybe might be time to reconsider putting Kyron Williams on punt return. But I mean, what do you think with the Arizona Cardinals? We kind of transitions into our next part with Marvin Harrison. I mean, this is the guy that you target in a lot of leagues and is huge. You don't want a team that wins week 1. You want a team that does not peak until like week 14 or 15 when you're ready to go. And Marvin Harrison arrived in this game in a blowout victory. Kyler Murray running around, his ACL looks healthy. What do you think?
Yeah, so everyone, a lot of people were going towards Kyler Murray in drafts. Kyler Murray was due for a bounce back. No one's really worried about the ACL injury. Kyler Murray, when healthy, is a fantastic player to watch, fantastic fantasy player to have on your team. And, something about Kyler is he's one of the more athletic quarterbacks, but he has a gunslinger mentality. If you go look at his highlights today of him going with the ball. Sorry, I just saw someone drop the ball. So that's what happens when you're live. You're still watching the game. I know you guys are all watching the game too, maybe listening. Kyler Murray, he's really, showed up, and then, Marvin had his comments, or not Marvin, but Kyler Murray had his comments about, it's not my job to get him the ball.
Smoke screen.
And, the first 2 drives, you see what happens when you get your 4th overall pick, the ball. Marvin Harrison, Maserati, people are talking about his speed. Marvin Harrison, he had 4 catches, 130 yards for 2 touchdowns. That's an average of, let me do the math, 40.
And it was 30. Like every 3 pass attempts was a touchdown for Kyler Murray in the first half, or his first 9 attempts.
Oh, yeah. So even with Kyler Murray, and he's running the ball, he's a gunslinger. I think the Cardinals, they're not going to win a lot of games, kind of like the Giants, I don't think, but they're going to be exciting. Kyler Murray and Marvin need to be in your starting lineups, especially if you have those stacks. And that goes to another couple fantasy, upsets and games upsets was the Saints versus Cowboys.
Yeah, this is the brutal one. A lot of people that have been following this podcast since its existence know that we are Dallas Cowboys fans. And so going into this game, I've done a lot of criticism of Dennis Allen and the Saints, and week 1 playing the Panthers, they've looked terrible. The Panthers have, and so I'm thinking, the Dallas Cowboys are going to come in here, put a lot of pressure on Derek Carr, and really get an easy dub in and out. They're at home in Arlington, and maybe it was the tropical storm that hit New Orleans, and they wanted to play a little heavy, or that the fact that the Super Bowl will be in New Orleans at the end of the year, but. All I got to say with Derek Carr is he's done miracles on me.
Are they the most surprising team to start the season so far?
In terms of positivity, yes. In terms of negativity, I think the Baltimore Ravens starting 0-2 is extremely, extremely shocking. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But yeah, hey, man, back-to-back 40-point games for the Saints. Derek Carr, to add on to what I was saying earlier, was not pressured at all. There was a sack listed on the Dallas Cowboys stat line if you had him in fantasy. I don't know where it came from. I never saw Derek Carr get touched unless it was like Taysom Hill at some point. But I mean, I thought it was Christmas a couple of years ago because Alvin Kamara, again, 4-touchdown game. Whoever had him in fantasy had a hell of a day, and probably had a stress-free day. But the Dallas defense, that is a concern going forward, is that you couldn't stop the run. It reminded me a lot of a couple years ago against the Rams in the playoffs in 2018. They just kept kind of doing these smash concepts in the run game to the right and then back to the left, wide side of the field. Couldn't stop it whatsoever, and the game plan Parsons perfectly.
Yeah, so I mean, what I've started to notice with the Cowboys having a better defense, over the last 3 or 4 years, is that for some reason it's almost like the defense kind of is going to dictate how the game's going to go, and that's with momentum on the defensive and offensive side of the ball. Because I've noticed a lot when the Cowboys are not, really they're struggling on defense, the offense seems to kind of struggle too, and that's with not necessarily maybe not moving the ball, but just not finishing drives. Luckily, we have a kicker who can, boot it from 60 plus. Every time you pass the 50-yard line, you're in field goal range. The Cowboys, I noticed with if the defense isn't, making plays, maybe not getting the most 3-and-outs and everything, I notice how the Cowboys offense starts to kind of simmer, and it almost makes it seem like, in a way, which is people are probably going to kind of disagree with this, it's almost like the defense kind of leads how the game is going to dictate with the Cowboys and their offense and also stopping somebody.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point. This reminded me of last year against Arizona with Dallas, but the Cowboys were efficient on offense, and like you said, in order to win in the NFL, you got to be able to score touchdowns. If you take away those 4 field goals and convert them into touchdowns, and I know not everything's perfect, but the Saints were today. It's a one-score ball game in the third quarter, 35-41, and yes, Aubrey is a weapon, but outside of that one Stephon Diggs looking miracle in Minnesota play towards the sideline with CeeDee Lamb going all the way, Dallas did not score a touchdown.
I don't think Dallas was inside the 10-yard line today.
If they were, they got immediately right back out of it with some stupid reverse play. But
I mean, thinking about that, we put points on the board, but they were 30 or they were like 40-yard field goals, 50, all this stuff. So I don't think the Cowboys, they put points up the board. Yeah, they didn't put up a lot of defense and stop anything, but I'm gonna have to go kind of recheck the game. But I do not think they were inside the 10-yard line, which is pretty concerning depending on how powerful the offense can be. But also it shows that the defense, they didn't come to show up. Offense, whether you want to say they were moving the ball or not, is you put up 16 points and you weren't ever in the end zone. And then, like I said, the CeeDee Lamb broke. That's why you pay a guy like CeeDee Lamb. I just think both sides of the ball need to go back to the drawing board and figure out what they need to do.
Ooh, I thought Pacheco really got torn up there. All right, yeah. So I got a question for you because this is going to be talked about in the media for sure this week, because last week, going into the year as fans, we had zero expectations on winning anything big because we lost a lot of parts and we didn't really gain anything. And then we had a strong showing against the Browns. The defense looked phenomenal. The offense didn't have to do too much. Going to the Saints and put up a performance like that, they're going to be talking about Dak Prescott, who was just paid. And he did have 2 interceptions on the box score here. And I want to know your analysis, because real eyes, on what do you think Dak Prescott is to blame for this, or do you think it's a majority of the defense?
Well, I'm gonna give it to a 50-50 kind of side. And when I say 50-50, it's I thought you were doing that to my comment.
No. Pacheco looked like, sorry.
Yeah, no, okay. So when I say 50-50, at the end of the day, they could not stop anybody. You could probably throw any running back. Yeah, the Saints are a hot team right now, but that doesn't give the defense any excuse. I think they played really well off Micah Parsons. Defense looked in shambles. Offense, if it is what I think it was, where you have this quarterback who just got paid and they're not getting the ball inside the 10-yard line, and at the end of the day, it's not like the defense couldn't stop anybody, right? So they're kicking it's not like the Cowboys were like, starting at their own 2,
Right.
starting at their own 5. Like most of their possessions started at the 30-yard line, 35-yard line. So, with the Cowboys and that, like, you got to put both sides of the ball. I don't think there's one more to blame than the other, because offense, if we didn't have the best kicker in the league, we probably don't score any points. and then the defense gives up that many points too. It just shows that the Cowboys were just all over the place. And I don't want to just say that's the reason why we lost.
Right.
I like to give it, both eyes. And Dak, he didn't play good, but he didn't play bad. But also, as being the leader of the offense, you have to somehow, some way get the ball.
Respond. Yeah.
Not necessarily have to score every drive, but I mean, at least get some red zone opportunities. Get some, red zone, inside the 15. We just were never in that opportunity to go.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I'm going to lean more 60-40 being on the defense at fault, because of the way that they started. It was just like they were getting just bull rushed. And it was one of those things where you're like, oh my God, 35 points in the first half, and our offense scored 16 in the first half. Most of the time, an offense scoring 16 points, that's a pretty decent first half. But, and Dak Prescott got a tough break with Jalen Brooks tripping over the middle for an interception. A lot of people are going to look at that box score and go, wow, Dak Prescott sucks. This is who you paid. At the same time, you have to be able to respond, because I know it was 41-19, but you got to pick the interception from your defense, from Donovan Wilson, and you were in plus territory. And what happens? You throw it into triple coverage. That interception's bad. You can't do that. As soon as you get an opportunity to get right back into the game, you throw it to Tyrann Mathieu, who is a veteran. I get it. Looking for your guy, CeeDee Lamb, get him involved. I understand the target of CeeDee Lamb, but you can't do that. That right there ended the football game. And from that point, and I called it early on too, that Dak Prescott is going to throw an interception at some point. We know this team better than anybody. But they're going to have to find a way to go back to it. It looked like they were experimenting with the running back and how they wanted their rotation to go, because Deuce Vaughn got a lot of opportunities. Rico Dowdle wasn't involved in the passing game. Looks like Zeke is going to be their red zone guy, per usual, which they should have had a touchdown, but Dak was pressured and missed that throw. But a lot to go back to the drawing board with the Dallas Cowboys, going against a very hungry Baltimore Ravens team who is 0-2 looking for their first win. That's going to be tough. Really, really tough.
Yeah, Ravens are going to need to figure it out. They got some issues on the defensive side, blowing a lead today. Last play of the game, Lamar had no time. Max Crosby is a disruptor of, offenses. That man is all over the place, and he's, true to himself. The thing about it is, the Cowboys, if they don't figure out what they're going to do, they need to score points, but defense also needs to stop them. And we see the game about to end with
oh my God, bro.
Caught me off. Looks like the Chiefs are going to get another opportunity to
oh my God
score. Well, we'll see. We've seen a lot of this with the Cincinnati and Kansas City games, coming down to the last minute. ESPN will talk about that for about 2 weeks.
Yeah, and going before the season started, it was like, oh, we're not. Dallas isn't worth talking. That is a PI.
PI.
4th and 16. If you're watching this game, a big pass interference on the defense for Cincinnati, and that'll give the Chiefs probably the win if they make the field goal here. But all right, yeah. Speaking of upsets, let's move on to Minnesota and the 49ers. Brock Purdy struggling at the office today. Justin Jefferson, I think, went out with a quad injury, which is important, but a 97-yard touchdown nonetheless. Sam Darnold, he looks good in Minnesota, man. I don't know what's going on. Maybe I think it speaks more to Kevin O'Connell, but what has impressed you most with Minnesota in the first 2 weeks? I know we haven't been able to watch any of their games, but just from a distant perspective.
So from a distance perspective, go back to Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold was drafted to the Jets. He's still a young guy. He came into the league at 20 years old. And you look at it, the Jets, until they got A-Rod, and A-Rod still isn't looking too sharp. He's a little bit older.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of quarterback troubles over there. Then he goes to Carolina. Baker Mayfield looks horrible. Then Sam Darnold looks horrible. Baker goes to Tampa Bay, finds a new home, weapons. He has a good coach, and Baker looks realized. I've never been the biggest Baker fan, but game is game. I like to give props when props are due. He looks fantastic so far, and he had a pretty good season last year. And Sam Darnold, he finally gets a good coach. He has a couple of weapons, and he looks like his career. He might get paid on like the Geno kind of revived a kind of career. I've always been a fan of Sam Darnold. I feel like he's always been some pretty bad situations.
Yep.
But yeah, Jetta, it seems like it's weird because he did score that 97-yard touchdown, which is impressive. Not the easiest thing to do. We never see touchdowns like that. But it seems like every time Jetta is hurt, somehow, some way, the Vikings win more often than not, which is kind of concerning.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if it's because they got to force feed Jetta being a top 1, top 2 wide receiver. But Niners, they always start kind of slow anyway. So it's pretty usual for the Niners to kind of lose beginning of the season. Brock Purdy did not play well. And Brandon Ayuk is getting out-targeted by Kyle Juszczyk and Debo, George Kittle. Brandon Ayuk, I know they paid him, but it doesn't even seem like they even wanted them there. Every time a report comes out, they're trying to trade him. He's like, look, either you take this deal or you're gone, but you're not going to get what you want. And yeah, it's just there's a lot of situation going on there in the Niners, but they're a great organization nevertheless, and they're going to figure it out.
Yeah, and I think it speaks volumes to Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota, who, I know they had a tough break with losing J.J. McCarthy to an injury, and I'm sure Sam Darnold was supposed to be the number 1 quarterback as listed in the camp notes. But, you're out T.J. Hawkinson, you're out Jordan Addison, now you're out Justin Jefferson, and you still find a way to beat our number 2 power ranked team, the San Francisco 49ers. And this defense, I think, needs to be talked about for Minnesota, who has held their opponents to under 20 points in the first 2 weeks. I know it was the Giants week 1, but they gave him hell, started to feel sorry for him. And then in the second week, did Brock Purdy throw 2 interceptions or was it just 1? I want to say he threw 2.
He threw for 2. He threw a lot. He threw a lot of passing yards, and that McCaffrey going on the IR, it's gonna, Jordan Mason, he has 20 carries for 100 yards. The Christian man has walked it off, Harrison Butker. So with the San Francisco 49ers, yeah, Jordan Mason is doable. A lot of running backs would be good in that system. A lot of people are good in that system, but McCaffrey, best running back in the league for a reason. When you give the best running back, arguably the best system in the league, he's gonna make it happen. So I think the McCaffrey injury kind of is gonna, not open up the offense as much. And the Niners are gonna have to figure out, okay, we're gonna need to do this with Jordan Mason. Jordan Mason, 20 carries, 100 yards. Man, yeah. Sorry, I didn't want. I got McCaffrey in one league, and I did not want him. I really did not, but here we are.
Yeah, and those guys that had the first overall pick that winded up with Jordan Mason, that's one of those things that where you wake up in the morning, you get on, you get out of your bed and you immediately put your hands together and thank God that you were able to get him in the waivers. It's you need to be thankful because anybody behind that scheme is going to be able to run the football except Elijah Mitchell. But I shout out to the Vikings, and then next Baker Mayfield. I know you spoke about him recently, but last year, he was kind of robbed a comeback player of the year to Joe Flacco, which shout out Joe Flacco. But Baker Mayfield had an incredible year, got his contract, had an interview before the game today with Carissa Thompson, and then goes to Detroit or plays Detroit and gets the victory. They held it. Shout out to the defense over there too. But man, we talked about it. I think it was the first, I don't remember how long it was, but the first 107 passing yards from Baker Mayfield all went to Chris Godwin. All of them, which is very rare.
Yeah. I've never seen anything like it. And then it was even with the Malik Neighbors and Daniel Jones, same thing. He has 65 passing yards, all the Malik Neighbors. It's one of those things where if you have him on your team, you're like, that's awesome. But at the same time, you're like, damn, spread the fucking ball. Like, what are we doing? Yeah. But I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah. Shout out to Baker Mayfield. I love that he's doing really well. And I spoke about it in the Stats and Scars episode in week 2. But when he does well, it just kind of electrifies me. And it's an underdog type feeling to where it's like, he talked about it in his interview. A lot of his motivation comes from little man syndrome a little bit. And I was like, he sprouted late is what he talked about. And you're like, man, kind of the same story in the NFL. I mean, the Browns, we talked about it as well in the Stats and Scars episode with how funny that radio show was talking about Baker's pass rating versus Deshaun Watson. Deshaun did not look good this week either. But Baker looks like a potential franchise guy for Tampa Bay. My question is that I'm going to shatter the script on is that Baker Mayfield has been a franchise guy all along. And when you put the right pieces together, a lot like a Jared Goff, a lot like, a player of that caliber, you start winning football games. It's a recipe for success. If you can get a good defense and get a guy loaded with some good weapons, and I get it, that's very infectious for all quarterbacks, but that is a way to win games. That's a game manager. There's nothing wrong with being a game manager. I think Baker's one of those guys, but I mean,
is he a 50 million guy?
No, I think he's one of those guys you want to pay as less as possible and get away with. I think Baker is one of those guys who understands his place in the market. I don't think he's really that greedy, but at the same time, you want to take care of him.
Is he a 45 million guy?
Yeah, I would say so. Would Daniel Jones be a 40 million guy?
No, he's not a 40 million guy.
It's tough. I mean, like, it's tier by tier. Is Sam Darnold a 40 million guy?
No, Sam Darnold's more of like a it's all about what team he's on. If he was to stay on the which they have JJ McCarthy, they wouldn't do this.
Yeah.
He's probably like a 25-30 million dollar guy on the Vikings.
Yeah.
But I mean,
way too early question. Is Sam Darnold a 40? Yeah. That's a fun question, I think, and I'd be interested to see how the Buccaneers do. I actually, after week 1, I made some predictions. This is kind of off the script of that. The Buccaneers are favorites to win their division, but now that the Saints are playing well, they look better than the Saints and the Buccaneers look twice as good as the Falcons do so far.
Let me ask you this: if Tua did not have injury concerns, who would you rather pay, Tua or Baker Mayfield?
To get the ball to Tyreek, Jalen Waddle, have that kind of speed.
Godwin, Mike Evans.
Oh, you're talking about Tua if Tua was on the Buccaneers?
Well, just in general.
In general?
Yeah. Who would you rather pay $55 million?
I don't want to say. I'm trying to think back. I don't want to be like recency bias here, but people would be like, "How could you think about this? How could you take this long to think about this?" It's Tua, obviously, but I think Tua is kind of more of a. Tua's not an overcomer. I don't think Tua is a type of quarterback that overcomes. I think Baker is the definition of overcome. Pause. But I think Baker Mayfield, I'm taking over that very, very slightly. I'm talking by a Dorito chip.
Fair enough.
That's a tough one.
My answer is going to be I'd rather pay neither 55. But
yeah,
probably. Yeah,
Tua's stats gave him 55 million, but Tua's talent does not get him 55 million.
Yeah, I guess if I need somebody, because Baker does have that, he can sling it. He has a little sling behind him, a little bit of a rocket in his pocket, but man, I don't. I think I'd have to pay. Fuck it, I'm gonna go Baker.
All right. Oh yeah, that's awesome. Okay. Yeah, and then last little highlight, Green Bay gets the dub against AR-15. I like it. Great win for Green Bay. That's one of those things like with Cooper Rush and Dallas, just keep trying to find ways to win. Does not matter how ugly. Great job from Green Bay. Indianapolis is going to have to figure some things out in the passing game. But I'll let you comment on that if you want to, but then we'll move on to the Shatter script.
Yeah, AR-15 struggled today. Rookie or second-year guy. Michael Pittman is, gonna have to find they're gonna have to do something. And JT, I think a big thing that happened to the Colts in the fourth quarter, JT has 13 carries for 102 yards, no sign of injury. They didn't report anything, and he doesn't touch the ball in the fourth quarter. I think that's very concerning. What they were doing to do that, they're not even ruling them out. That's probably a big reason why the Colts were struggling, because 13 carries for 102 yards. That's not chump change. So we'll see what the Colts do. And I don't know if they're trying to lean more towards having AR lead the team or rely on JT. I guess we'll see moving forward. When it comes to stuff like this with teams and everything, by week 6 or 7, you know where everybody kind of stands. What's the team's identity? And, we'll see what the Colts do moving forward.
Yeah. Sorry, Dua Lipa was on the TV right now.
I love me some Dua Lipa.
If you're just now joining us, 60 Minutes is on, so turn that shit off and please join into ours. Ask us questions about fantasy football, whether on YouTube, Twitter, or Instagram. Hunter would be happy to answer those for you guys. Any college football questions as well, you're welcome to ask. We're always open to interacting with the crowd. But we appreciate you guys joining this episode of Week 2 of Shatter the Script. We kind of covered a little bit about Baker being the franchise guy in our Shatter the Script segment. And I want to talk about the Tua Tagovailoa injury. We both kind of saw it coming. 4th down, your team's down. It's kind of a blowout. You want to sell out for your team. And ironically, Damar Hamlin is the guy that hits you, and the fingers go all crazy, and you got another concussion. I think his 4th or 5th since he joined the NFL for Tua Tagovailoa. He announced today that he has no plans of retiring. My comment on that is that he may not want to let go of football, but this is something he is seeking a concussion specialist. I think that is the right move. I think this is bigger than football. I don't want to see. I wouldn't want to have that burden upon me as a head coach, as an organization, to keep kind of throwing him out there in an environment to where you could damage your family, you could damage your kids with a father that might go brain dead or whatever. I hope for the safety of him. And we talked about the NFL talked about, I should say, when Damar Hamlin went down, that we're going to scrap this game and that the health of the players matters more than an NFL football game. And I know it was just a concussion, but it's a different story with the history of Tua Tagovailoa. And I would really weigh on Tua to just sit back and evaluate what's worth it. I mean, he did get paid. This is one of those things. I mean, other quarterbacks in the NFL in history, like Andrew Luck, retired for his shoulder injuries and all that kind of stuff. And you see a lot of defensive guys, some running backs retire early due to concussions. And I don't feel like they had near as much as concussions as Tua in such short of a span. I just think you're going to have to really, really evaluate, not from what you want to make the decision on, but from your specialists and all that kind of stuff. It's just that time where you do want to listen to your doctors.
So, yeah, when it comes down to it, everybody in life has their own choices. There's always, opinions, facts, and everything like that. As long as nobody's telling Tua he has to, it's one of those things where it's like he makes his own decision. If he goes out there, he's like, I'm going to do it. This is that's something that he's going to have to live with. As much as we want to tell Tua what to do, Tua is a grown man. He's going to do what he wants to do. And, we just pray that he stays healthy, whether that's if he doesn't play football or he does play football, because, we don't wish injuries, death, anything like that upon long-term injuries upon anybody that plays the game. We love football, but it's not that deep. So if Tua, he's like, the neurologist, they say that's all you could do is help, but you can't tell him what to do.
Right. You can only recommend.
Exactly. He's gonna make his own decisions, whether that he's like, I want to move forward, I don't, whatever he decides to do, I just gotta let him do it.
Right.
We can, and his family can do this, but everyone knows it's a sore subject. But if he goes, let's just say he's like, I go out there and something does happen, hopefully it never does. At the end of the day, he made his own decision. There's people who, they say, I would die for the game of football. Maybe he really does mean that. There's a lot of people who say that. Yep. I'll die for my teammates. And it's one of those things you put at risk. There's everything in life you do a risk. But as long as this is not a dictatorship, this isn't this, you have your own choices. And that's what makes America great. Most jobs, you have the choice to quit, do what they're doing. And, you're not forced to do anything. And that's going to be with Tua moving forward.
Yeah, the good thing about Tua Tagovailoa, and I think you have good points, is that Tua, you're never going to question his loyalty to the franchise. You're never going to question his dedication to getting better. He's one of those leaders that you want in the locker room to lead your team. Those are the incentives that, a quarterback like Dak Prescott has, in terms of talent and getting it done, in the playoffs. All that stuff kind of is wiped from the from the whiteboard, and you have to look at it from a perspective of, how can I impact my teammates? How can I impact my coaches in terms of my NFL career? What legacy do I want to leave behind for my kids? And I think that's going to motivate him to come back to the game of football. I really hope that he continues to, consider it, but I hope that he's out there playing and he never gets another concussion again. But he has the potential to really make a strong comeback and continue to his NFL career. And I just hope that he's able to play. I really do. I just want him to make the smart decision. I hope he gets really good recommendations. But I'm all in on him wanting to play and doing it and living with that decision comfortably. Go play, because I like to watch. I mean, Miami's not the same without him. You can't have a high-flying, speed-kills offense without Tua Tagovailoa.
Exactly. And to kind of end on this point from my side is, I always say there's one thing that there's not a price tag on, and it's peace of mind. Whether that's making a decision to go with a new career, whether it's to make this extra leap, whether it's doing this, whether it's not to do something, that it's whatever brings that peace of the mind. And there's no price tag on that. Peace of mind will go. So, whatever decision he makes, he's making it from his side. So it's like, if this is the way he's going to do, he has the peace of mind of, that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I kind of sound like Kamala Harris right there for a second. I'm not going to cap.
Unburdened by what has been.
I feel like I just said the same thing twice without actually trying to do it. I promise you, I'm not endorsing Kamala Harris. I'm not Taylor Swift. That's all I can say.
They're eating the dogs. No, okay. But they're talking about January 6th on the 60 Minutes. This is why you need to turn this shit off. Okay, and the last one on the Shatter the Script subject before we get into your stardom sit-em recaps is, are the Baltimore Ravens in trouble? And looking at that last Dallas performance, they might not be. They might be okay, get back on track with the win 1-2. But in terms of what the Dallas Cowboys should do is, in terms of matchups, I think they're a good match for Baltimore. They have struggled in the past against running quarterbacks. They made Mitchell Trubisky look like Lamar Jackson. Well, now they're actually playing Lamar Jackson, so maybe elevate his running ability by 70 billion. But the Baltimore Ravens, it's concerning to me that they held a 10-point plus lead against a Raiders team who is not very talented across the board, but they have some players, and they're well coached by Anthony Pierce, and they blow that lead and lose last second to 26-23. They had a tough one, but a good showing in the first week against the Chiefs. But I thought it was concerning with her offensive line and what they weren't able to protect with Lamar Jackson against the Chiefs. So I think it's double concern for the Ravens. You drop a game versus the Chiefs, that's a tough one. It's understandable, but you have to bounce back and you have to win versus a Raiders team, which you by far should beat, and you lose. And I think that's tough. The way that they lost is more concerning than the loss.
No, it's a good point. And another thing to say too is, the thing about the Ravens is the Ravens have been good for quite some time, years on and years on. There's always a very, reliable team to that city. Thing about it is, you can't keep a dog down for too long. And that's the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens is, if there's going to be a game for them to get back on track, it's going to be the Cowboys game. Cowboys defense is, they're going to be playing at home versus Dallas. Dallas has their own struggles. We're looking at it like, we dominated the Browns. We know the Browns defense and their capability. They go out, they have a stinker. It kind of shows like, this team, this defense, whether that was overshown not playing that much, or it was just the Saints just being better than what people expected. The Ravens, if they're going to look back to, it's kind of hard because as a Cowboys fan, I don't see the Ravens going 0-3. I would hope for the Ravens to go 0-3.
Right.
But,
I agree, though.
So, looking at it is, it's the Cowboys, they need to figure out what they're going to do. Is the game next week? Is it a 3:25, 7:20 game?
I would imagine it feels like a CBS game. Like
it's not on CBS.
Yeah, but it feels like it.
Because
if it's don't care about your feelings.
Well, because if it's a Fox game, that's 3 games in a row with Tom Brady commentating the Cowboys.
Quick comment on Tom Brady. Tom Brady sounded a lot better today. A lot than the first week. The first week I was like, dude, this dude's in the category with Colt McCoy. This week, pretty good job. I liked his analysis. Seemed a little bit more comfortable with KB, Kevin Burkhardt. But all the questions or all the commercials and other commercials, many ones with Rob Gronkowski, all kind of glazing Tom Brady is kind of getting old. But I think you made good points with the Ravens.
Tom Brady is commentating this for a third game in a row.
Yeah, exactly. Great. So 3 games with Tom Brady for the Dallas Cowboys. Who would have thought? He did say before he retired that if he was ever beaten by the Cowboys, he would retire, and he kept his word. But who would have thought, back to the Ravens, who would have thought that the leader of the division through 2 weeks, and I know it's only 2 weeks, would be Pittsburgh at 2-0 and Cleveland, surprisingly, at 1-1, and both Cincinnati and Ravens at 0-2.
Pittsburgh has to be the most boring team I've ever seen.
Oh, it's miserable.
It's like either watching it or if you're just looking at it from ESPN, it's like Najee Harris, 2-yard run. Najee Harris, 1-yard run. Pat Freiermuth, 4-yard catch, punt. Justin Fields runs for 6 yards. Najee up the gut, -2. Like it's so boring. Just to, like I cannot stand what I'm so glad I'm not a Steelers fan because if I had to watch that team every Sunday and actually cheer for them, I would lose myself because they're just horrible to watch. They put in Arthur Smith who is all
ugly.
This stuff. Yeah. So it's one of those things where fantasy wise, it's hard to kind of roll with their team because it's just so boring. It's not exciting.
Yeah.
They have Pickens who can be something, but man, oh man, it's horrible to watch. It really is.
Yeah, and what's funny about that, like with the play-by-play, it's like 1-yard rush, 2-yard rush, 4-yard catch, and then you get on defense, it's like sack, fumble by T.J. Watt, recovered, 1-yard rush, 2-yard rush, 3-yard Pittsburgh field goal, and you're like, okay, well they field goaled every team to death, and T.J. Watt is basically the Night's Watch, Game of Thrones reference for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Mike Tomlin needs to go down as the most mid-successful coach of all time. It's just like we can score 16 and win every week, and we finish plus 500. But hey, looking the way it's looking right now, they finished 9-8. They could be first place in their division. And just wait until my DB list candidate Russell Wilson, who showed up in pads inactive last week, he might have done it a second week in a row. Gets back in the quarterback 1 spot because he is elite.
So let's just say this: the Steelers they're 2-0. They've given up 10 and 13 points. They have kicked 8 field goals with 1 touchdown, and they are 2-0. That's what's crazy about this being a stat watcher.
Yeah.
You're like, how the hell are they 2-0 and they scored 1 touchdown all year?
Field goal them to death. Yeah, I sentence you to field goals. Yeah, it's bad. It's one of those things that really aggravates a fan and a fantasy football owner. And so I guess determine what you want to do with your Pittsburgh Steeler fantasy football players. Speaking of fantasy football, let's get into your stardom sit-em recaps and how it went week 2. Again, disclaimer, it is very hard to predict what the hell is going to happen through 2 weeks of football. Week 1 was extremely wacky. Week 2 was way more wacky. A lot of good teams lost when they shouldn't have. And so I guess we'll see how you did. I haven't been able to check. So
to go with it's funny about doing, stardom sit-ems and, everyone saying, oh, this man's cocky. All he does is talk about how he wins leagues, which I do win a lot of leagues. But at the same time, I gotta own my defeats and everything.
How else are you going to listen to you if you don't tell you what your history? Like when you get hired, let's say a presidential candidate. Why do you vote for a presidential candidate? Because of what he has done. And so for you taking over the fantasy helm, I said, look, I haven't done enough for our country and fantasy football outlook. So I'm going to give it to somebody who has had far more success than me. I still have success, but far more, and lives and breathes and passionate for fantasy football. Why not you? So you have to give a little bit of a hierarchical background.
Yeah. So Pacheco, Dobbins looked good. Dobbins, he did his thing. Pacheco had 90 yards rushing. He had, let's see what his receiving was.
I can find this picture.
5 catches for 21. So to kind of look at it, if we want to go one by one, Jaden Daniels, they didn't score any touchdowns. He ran the ball. JK, so, wasn't a hit. I started him, kind of screwed me a little bit. J.K. Dobbins, running back, looked good. Pacheco, he put up a serviceable game. I said to start him. Jameson Williams, he had 4 catches for 70 yards. He was very, he's a deep ball threat. They struggled. Mike Evans, he didn't really do anything today, but also Chris Godwin was tearing them up. Evan Ingram got ruled out about 25 minutes before the game. He was in the other stardom. I said throw in Likely. Likely didn't do shit. And then Jaguars struggled a little bit today. Now, this is where I really, really messed up, and I got to own it. A-Rod, I said sit him. A-Rod threw 2 touchdowns, probably put about 15, 16 points. Alvin Kamara, I said sit. I hope nobody listened to me. I'm glad y'all didn't because he put up 44 points.
Yeah.
Bijan, we're going to see it. George Pickens didn't do anything today. Calvin Ridley scored a touchdown. Cole Kmet hasn't played. In the Buccaneers defense, I don't know exactly what they did. But it's kind of back to the drawing board. It's one of those things where I missed it. It was a weird week of fantasy once again.
Let it cook. Give it time, people.
The Alvin Kamara, man, he tore Dallas up.
Honestly, watching the show, the follower of the show, who could have predicted that? After the Cowboys dominating week 1 performance, you thought that Dennis Allen's poorly coached Saints historically would come in to Dallas and just absolutely rout them with the Alvin Kamara Christmas repeat edition of 4 touchdowns, going untouched in the end zone multiple times. Yeah. I don't feel like that's on you.
It's okay. I made the wrong decision, but I'll tell you this, guys. On Wednesday, you're gonna get a new start and sit 'em. I'm gonna cook this week. As long as I don't get an injury report, I'm gonna cook. I'm gonna go look at the games. I'm gonna cook something up. Maybe have a little analysis behind it, and we'll see what's up.
Yeah. And that's the fun part. I think what a big thing that's going to change this week for us is going to be our power rankings. There's going to be a lot of moving around in our power rankings.
Big time.
And we got, as we get closer to Carrie Underwood's performance tonight before we kick off Sunday Night Football, we have a team inside the top 5, the Houston Texans, who are going to be playing tonight. I think they were outside of yours. And possibly they could stay or be exited out of there. But it'll be an interesting game going against Caleb Williams, who did not really throw well. Their defense looked very dominating, though. So that'd be interesting to watch. But yeah, I'm going to go through a little bit of my college football picks here if you're wrapped up with your fantasy stuff.
Yeah, it was a disappointment.
Okay. So, we did our challenge of script with LSU at South Carolina. I had chosen the South Carolina Gamecocks, shout out Cox, to win the ball game versus LSU. And I really thought that they did plenty to win this game with a backup quarterback. And I thought they were bailed out of a terrible call, which resulted in an LSU W 36-33. But in my book, I think South Carolina won that game. And if you were betting on this game, you were kind of screwed out of it because I had the prediction correct and that pick 6 should have counted for South Carolina if you were watching it. Brutal. But moving on to Alabama and Wisconsin, I had them winning 34-27. Alabama blew them out, blew Wisconsin out of the water. This is one of those matchups that I thought that the SEC would dominate in. I was correct. Alabama with a great win. They looked better and better each week. Without Nick Saban, a lot of analysts have said that the transition from Saban to DeBoer has been a great move. I 100% agree. They look pretty well coached. They kind of seem a little bit more tackier in terms of like attitude. Like they're a little more spunky, but I don't think a lot of it's would be something that Saban lets fly. But hey, it's a new coach, and you're gonna get away with a little bit more than you did with Saban. But shout out to Alabama for winning that game. This one was crazy though. It's really tough. I don't want to make excuses, but it's really tough for me to get college football updates on injuries and stuff like this. It was even for my own team when Weigman was almost ruled out and ended up not playing against Florida.
I'm the one who told you that too, which is kind of weird because I don't really keep up with college football as much as you do.
Thank you, by the way, because I was like, what? So I need to find a way to set those alerts because it really mattered when it came to the Kentucky versus Georgia game. And last week they got routed by South Carolina, but I did not know that their quarterback was hurt in that game and was going to return versus Georgia at Kentucky. So Kentucky field goal the crap out of Georgia and played phenomenal defense. Very, very tight game. I was wrong, but I got the win right with Georgia. They ended up winning. But, man, I was like, God, I would have predicted this game a lot differently. I definitely would not have been right about the score. I still think Georgia would have won. But I'll tell you this. Here's a hot take for my college football fans out there. I don't think Carson Beck is worth the crap. I think Carson Beck, I mean, he's projected a first-round pick. I think he's protected by the talent around his team. I really don't think he's that special of a quarterback. And if you look at the animated movie Hercules, you'll see that he looks like an exact replica. But, yeah, 2 out of 3 so far of my picks. This one I did not announce, but I had share with my close friends. I had Texas A&M going into the swamp and beating Florida 21-20 with Connor Weigman as a starting quarterback. But it looks like Texas A&M might have found their quarterback, sucks to say, Marcel Reed, the freshman. I mean, that dude looked phenomenal against Florida in a blowout game. I know it was 33-20. It was 33-7, and that game was over. Texas A&M looks a whole lot better when they have a true dual threat quarterback. He actually reminds me a little bit of Jaden Daniels' play. He had a great Euro step juke late in the ball game to secure the victory. A&M looked amazing on offense this week. Through the rain, through the weather delay, that might have been a testimony of why the score was the way it was, but A&M got jumped out and got a lead really quick and ended up getting a great W. But they do technically have a tough matchup versus Bowling Green coming up. Don't sleep. I mean, they gave Penn State a tough time, and I'm not discounting that. Go in there and rip their heads off, metaphorically, and, hit them on their ass, pick them up, and say, Jesus loves you, pat them on the ass, get back out there. But it ain't going to be an easy game. Just go in there, do your thing, and it'll turn out to be an easy game in the scorecard. Then you have to get to play the little piggies. Ooh, piggy. The Arkansas, which we might actually be at that game. But, yeah.
2v2.
So, yeah, I was 3 out of 4 on my college football picks this week. Didn't do as well in terms of betting, like with the spread and stuff like that, but it's always very unpredictable. And I'm looking forward to this upcoming week's thing. So let's get into our Sunday night football final score predictions, or any props that you have out there. It doesn't matter. But we got the Houston Texans. Are they at Chicago?
No, they're in Houston.
Okay, they're in Houston. So we're going to go catch that game here. We're like 30 minutes outside of NRG. But Houston hosting the Chicago Bears, both 1-0. What do we got?
I got the Texans winning. I think hopefully the Chicago Bears put up a good fight, but Houston's coming alive, and I'm probably gonna be wrong because I just said this, but I'm hoping I'm just looking for a good game. I really do need a defensive. I need about 11 points from Joe Mixon, and I need a defensive touchdown by the Chicago Bears. DJ Moore, give me some touchdowns, man, and then we can finally put it. Last week I went 0 for 8 in fantasy, cool. But this week it's looking like I'm probably going about 6-2.
Don't forget the lead median 0-9. No.
Yeah, it looks like I'll be going 6-2 this week.
Hell yeah, that's what we call bouncing back. And again, we got to keep stressing this. You are not drafting a team or encouraging your followers to draft a team that wins week 1. Peak week 15 and win your championships. All that matters is that you sneak into the playoffs. It doesn't matter who the fuck you play then. You just beat their brakes off because you got better and better each week. Tell them about when you went 1-5 and you won the championship. Not to glaze you or anything, but hey, I got to defend my guy here.
Yeah, that was my second year of the Game of Throws fantasy league, and I started 0-4, and I had to wear this. Most leagues don't do league median. This is the first time I had the league median, and I had the most points scored plus the most points scored on, and I was 0-4. It's looking bad. I went on this little run. My team got better, ended up winning the championship. Went back to back in that league. Started 1-3 in the other league I won. Won 9 straight games because all my Travis Etienne, my Kenneth Walkers, all those guys came along, and it's one of those things where, yeah, if you can get the playoffs at 7-7, at the end of the day, a lot of people get a first round bye. A lot of times they get bounced in the second round. And it's not like the real football where it's like, momentum. But you just need to get into the playoffs. And then, hopefully the team you're going against, it's like, I'm going against the 1 seed this week, but he just had a better record than me. But looking at it, my team's better. That's why you make trades, draft well. You don't draft to win week 1, week 2, week 3. You go to win, championships. You go to win week 15, week 16, week 17, and that's what we're going to do. I'll keep giving y'all updates about how to improve your team. Target these guys. Hoorah!
I was thinking about cutting you off during that and be like, all right, that's enough. Like I should not have gone back to that. But yeah, okay. So you got Houston winning tonight.
Houston.
And what was the final score prediction?
I'm gonna go with 28-24 Houston.
Okay. I like that prediction. I think defense for Chicago Bears is going to be pretty interesting to watch tonight. They led the NFL in interceptions last year. I want to see what they do against CJ Stroud, who has a loaded arsenal of weapons, and how they stop the run game. I really think that they go back to that Joe Mixon workload, but I can see Dameon Pierce getting some touches in this ball game tonight because of the large workload that Joe Mixon had in week 1.
Well, let's hope you're wrong, sir.
Well, I think 80% will go to Joe Mixon, and he'll get 16 to 20 carries. And Dameon Pierce will be vulturing touchdowns. No. All right, but yeah, I think Joe Mixon will be vital for the Houston Texans in this game. I had the Texans winning 23-16. I think it's going to be a kind of a lower scoring ball game, but I think CJ Stroud gets it done. Efficient in the air, 2 touchdowns, 1 touchdown going to either Tank Dell or Nico Collins. I can see woke boy Dalton Schultz getting in the end zone tonight. But yeah, you never know. But we both got the Texans winning tonight. I'm sure that the Bears will score 48 unanswered points, and Caleb Williams, the LGBTQB1, will have the game of his life. And so, but we'll see. But what a day of NFL football, to wrap things up with this episode. And, I like that when the Dallas Cowboys don't play at 3:25, we get a full volume episode, and we're way on pace to finish so that everybody gets to shut off this episode, skip 60 minutes, and then go straight to Carrie Underwood and just tell everybody eating dinner, please be quiet. The most beautiful woman, Carrie Underwood, is singing the best song in America, and
Football night in America.
So, all right. Well, we appreciate you guys joining this episode. Again, if you guys are in this episode live and you catch it on Sundays, don't be afraid to ask questions about fantasy football, about matchups, about college football. We're always happy to catch some questions and answer you guys as best we can. We love the interaction, but you can follow us on sts.pod on all platforms. We got our link tree in each of our bios. We'll be releasing this episode on Spotify tomorrow, Apple Podcasts on Tuesday, another episode on Twitter, just kind of hosted live for you guys so you can watch in case you're on there. And then on Thursday, we'll have our 3rd edition of the Stats and Scars with the medical guy and the analyst. And then this Friday at 8 a.m., we'll have our Challenge the Script with a guest for the Tennessee at Oklahoma game, which will be an exciting game to watch. So keep posted on all those things, all things Shatter the Script every day. You're getting some piece of content from us. Wednesday, Stardom Sit-Ems coming out, as well as the college football picks of the week and our quotes of the week from the Stats and Scars crew, which was pretty funny last week. So we appreciate you guys joining. We hope that you guys follow and share this podcast with your friends. We're really looking to grow as a platform, and we want to be that outlet media source that is outside of the margins of the mainstream. And, we got some feedback outside of this podcast saying we want a source that is not ESPN, that doesn't talk about all these things. That is us. So we appreciate you guys supporting us. It'll get better each time we come out, and we're happy to do it. So, all right. We appreciate you guys coming in and checking out the podcast. We will catch y'all next Sunday live at 6 p.m. with another edition of Saturday Script Week 3.